Hello, everybody. We'll be starting the webinar soon. We're just waiting for a few more people to join. If Winston, if you could please unmute so we are able to introduce ourselves, that'll be great.
Awesome. Unmuted. So we'll just wait for a couple more people to come in. So thank you for letting us know that.
Weirdest thing is not having the separate monitor. I was trying to say that as if everybody could hear us, but it's okay. We're just going to have to remember that the camera's there
Not here.
instead of right in front of you. Yeah, that's probably the most interesting thing of this is I keep thinking the cameras come on. Brand new in there. I said he was going to show. All right, Edna, we're at 6 after. Are we ready to get started?
Yes, feel free.
All right, great. Well, hey, welcome everybody. My name is Brooks. I gotta remind myself that the camera is up here. I'm very excited about this webinar. I know we have some great things to to chat with you guys about and share some really good information with you. But what I'm probably most excited about is this is the first ever webinar that we've been able to do live on a campus. So, I'm going to introduce Winston to you guys here in a minute, but this is the first webinar done. We are live at the University of Tennessee today, which is, like I said, has been really cool. I've been here the last couple of days meeting with the professors that we work with at Tennessee. And, we're going to wrap up my stay here by doing this webinar. So, you guys will probably see the excitement in my face of being able to do this live and actually shake the person's hand versus having this Brady Bunch feel of all of these different, screens that we're doing it. So I'm very excited about that. Obviously, you guys know the topic today is Microsoft Excel in academia. I think everything we almost talk about at ExPrep is going to revolve obviously around Excel and probably have academia right there with it. So I know you guys did not come here to listen to me. So I am literally going to quickly hand this over to Winston. So our guest here today, who really, in my opinion, is the host, is Winston Smith. Obviously, he teaches at the University of Tennessee. He teaches what I would call the Excel class, but I'm going to let him introduce the formal name and explain what he does and how he goes about teaching his students. So Winston, it's all yours, man.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brooke. So as Brooke said, so I'm at the University of Tennessee, so grew up here. And I want to take the time to thank ExPrep as well. So one of the things that I've experienced over the years is, watching this journey go from, being a young lecturer, taking over a large class in Excel, and really trying to engage students in a better way. And so a lot of what I'm going to do at the beginning is kind of talk through my experience with, evolving this class to the point to where it's at. And then I want to actually just be hands-on and show you what it is that I'm doing with Excel. So a little bit of backstory. So, I went to the University of Tennessee as an undergrad. One of the first classes that I just really enjoyed actually was Excel. It got me excited. I was able to, to go to coffee shops and do my personal finances to-do list. And then I get into, the practice, the professional world. And for me, I was an accountant, so I'm a CPA. And so very early on, Excel is very, very, the forefront of everything that I do. And what I learned early on as well is if you're able to be good at Excel, then obviously you're a difference maker. So very early on, I'm the person that people are going to. They say, I have this problem, and I get to be the person that solves it, which, by the way, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, right? So you end up with a lot of questions. But either way, so my experience early on was that Excel is a way of differentiating myself. So for instance, something that I saw my colleagues taking 8 hours to do, I'm able to do in 30 seconds with enough Excel skills. And that's making real life impact. So what happens, so I'm in public accounting, and my colleague ends up, and she's my mentor, one of my, she was in my wedding. And so she ends up actually getting an offer to come to UT. And I say, wait, hold on, that's an option. I get to actually teach like that. Is that even, an avenue I want to be interested in? And, at the time I'm senioring jobs. And then my favorite part of that job was actually teaching interns what it is that they were supposed to do. And so obviously when I saw that opportunity, I said, hey, maybe I can do this as well. And then the opportunity came. I took a different class initially, but in year 3, I actually took on the Excel class. Now, early on, obviously I know the value of it. As I mentioned before, you can be a difference maker, and I want to, help my students become that difference maker as well. But the challenge is that, at a university my size, the fall semester, my very first one, was 700 students. Now, with that, it's now grown to a point where it's 1,300 students. So when I came into this class, they said, your purpose is to help students solve business problems using these applications. Now, with the scale of 700 students, I'm asking myself, well, how do I scale this to provide feedback? How do I, properly engage students to make them interested? And so we explored some opportunities with, asynchronous content. But at the time, I only had 8 GTAs, and there's only so many hours in the day that they can use to grade. And so what ended up kind of happening was what my vision was instead of multiple choice and instead of more conceptual around Excel, I want them to be hands-on with Excel. That's going to be how you're that difference maker on day one. And that's one of the things that I tell students on day one, actually, is that one day someone's going to hand you an Excel file. They're going to say, solve my business problem. They don't care how you solve it. If you use a pivot table, cool. If you use a sum if, cool. But the point is that you need to have the skills and the critical thinking to be able to do that. And the only way to do that is to be hands-on and doing Excel files. And so with a class that size, what I did was that they have these asynchronous assignments where they actually take these videos, they watch the videos, they complete Excel assignments, and they turn them in. Now, grading 700 students with that and also exams kind of became a challenge. So at the beginning, I partnered with another textbook and outsourced some of those assignments. And I'm sure many of you all are experiencing something similar. You outsource some assignments, but what I found was that there was not the same voice in my assignments versus what other assignments were doing. And then also I realized this disconnect of these textbooks had a lot of words, so a lot of chapters, and people are expecting them to read about a VLOOKUP. But how do you learn to do a VLOOKUP? You have to do one. You have to go in there and actually, perform an if statement or a VLOOKUP. And I said, okay, well, I want them to be hands-on doing it. And I also want a similar voice across my entire class, because again, if I teach something a certain way in class, and then they go to a homework assignment and they expect it to be done differently, then that caused some friction. That was kind of one of my early challenges. And I was doing the best I could my first semester, but that was one of the biggest hiccups. I mean, I got a lot of emails, I got a lot of questions of, hey, how is it grading this way? And so very early on, I said, okay, well, I need to do something and I need to make this more of an instructor-led class, and I want them solving problems. So I don't want to move away from it. But they also came to me and said, well, you expect more students and the GTAs get the same number of hours. So we're at this point where I can't grade more, but I also want this consistent voice all the way throughout the class. And of course, that's where ExPrep comes in. And I get this opportunity. And what ends up happening is I'm able to customize my assignment. So I'll talk more about that in just a moment and what it looks like. But what that did was that empowered me a couple of things. So I have a textbook that's associated with it. I can talk about that in a moment as well. But what I was able to do was students are able to complete asynchronous assignments, on the front end, and they get immediate feedback. They submit something, they watch along with the video, they upload it, they get immediate feedback. And then in lab on Friday, because I have a Thursday due date, we come in person in lab on Friday, and then that's where I get to be hands-on with them. So they've already learned the concepts, and now I get to actually just do cool things, right? So the point of lab is where we're going to do comprehensive concepts. We're going to have them critically thinking. They're actually going to be solving business problems. And this is more of in an environment where they can make mistakes, right? So they can do a variety of different ways of solving it because they've already learned it. Now let's actually solve business problems. And then the next step was that they get to do homework assignments as well. And all of this is under the same, kind of voice of, how I actually teach the class. So as a result of that, what I've done is, and this is something that was huge benefit, cannot overstate it, was my GTAs. So I still have my GTAs. Previously, they were working about 5 hours a week grading. They have 10 hours, so that they dedicated about 5 hours a week to students, 5 hours a week to grading. Now all 10 of those hours are actually dedicated to helping students. So what I've done is I've reallocated that time to a point where Monday through Thursday, I have help sessions every morning and afternoon. Myself, GTAs, we're available to students. We're hands-on. They're automatically getting feedback from the homework assignment. They mess something up. They're saying, I don't know how to do it. Well, now we're available to actually help them. And that's the primary value add now that my GTAs are able to do that they were not previously able to do. So that's been kind of my approach. So I approach it from a kind of a 3-step, process where they learn it initially asynchronously, they comprehensively walk through it in a lab, and then they try it on their own. Now, when they try it on their own, there's obviously a lot of resources. I can show you what those look like. But the key is that feedback piece, because previously students wouldn't get feedback for about 2 weeks time because we were manually grading every assignment. Or if they got feedback from this other platform, it was kind of rigid and it wasn't able to match what we actually did in class. But now they get the immediate feedback. They know exactly what they do, and now we're able to provide some of that feedback immediately. So so what I can do is I can actually walk through and be hands-on with you and show you a little bit of demo. So I want to actually show you what an assignment might actually look like. How do I structure this actually in class? And so I'm going to go ahead and switch over and share my screen real quick. Give me one moment. Perfect. Now, following along with this, I'm going to show you all a little bit, Canvas side of things, and and then walk you through the process. So as I told you, there's 3 approaches. So every single week, they follow a very similar model. It's just an overview, asynchronous assignment, lab, homework. That's all it is. Now we have all the different assignments. We have an asynchronous submission, a lab submission, and a homework submission. But how does this look? So initially they learn the content with some videos. They walk along through it. So what does that actually look like? So if you were to look at the asynchronous assignment, I'll pull up Excel. This is actually what an Excel file might look like. So I told you before that the main point is to actually be hands-on. I'm not trying to, ask multiple choice questions. And the other thing is I want to have some flexibility for if a student does it, one way versus another way, as long as it's correct, then I want them to be able to submit that assignment. So when you look at this for the asynchronous assignment, they just follow along with it. So you'll see here they have 10 different videos, or 10 different worksheets, I should say. So they have these different worksheets and we learn different concepts, right? So here we're learning about some cell referencing, whether that's absolute, mixed, relative, etc. over here, we learned about some lookups. So that's going to be your VLOOKUPs and your HLOOKUPs. And each of these worksheets correspond to a video. Now, this is where, so I actually created all this content. It's through Great River Learning. And so I provide this to the students as well. So they have Great River Learning where the content is, they have ExPrep where the actual assignment is. And the way that this works is going back to what I was saying before, where, how do you learn Excel? So I'm a nerd in Excel. I didn't learn Excel by a textbook. I didn't read, 10 pages about a VLOOKUP. Instead, I just did a bunch of VLOOKUPs. And so the point of this text is more online resources, right? So it's more, let's figure out how to help them, walk them through some things and provide some resources. So this is as much as they'll ever read in a given week. It's just an introduction, and let's go ahead and get hands-on with Excel. So you'll see that each of these correspond with, each of these videos correspond with one of the worksheets. I told you before, there's 10 different worksheets. And so there's then also going to be 10 different videos as well. I tend to try to have eight or less minutes each. This one happens to be 14, but typically keeping them small and to the point. I found that my students have received that rather well. So what they do is Monday through Thursday, there's not a formal lecture. Now, I also in the summertime do formally lecture this. So if I'm lecturing it in person, it's the same concept. I take the same exact files, but I just lecture it in person and still provide them the content. But in a normal semester, because of the class size, we're not able to, have enough rooms for everybody. And I'm the only instructor for 1,300 students. And so the way that we're able to do this is a little bit of asynchronous content, learn it on your own, come to class on Friday and apply it. So what they'll do is they'll follow along with each of these videos, and you'll see that there's a lecture video. So you would watch this lecture video, you would go to the asynchronous assignment, and you would just literally follow along and submit it. So what this does is this allows students to follow along, try it on their own, because being hands-on and doing it is how you're gonna learn how to solve those business problems. But the first step is just learning it initially. And so you have this video, you follow along, and then you end up uploading into ExPrep. I can show you how that looks in just a moment. But then once you upload it into ExPrep, now we're going to actually walk through it in a lab. So how does a lab actually look? This is the way that I personally structure labs. So again, we're trying to get them to solve business problems using the applications. So what I typically do is just ask some business questions, and I give them some data. And I do about 10 minutes. So my lab sessions are 50 minutes, right? So I'm going to do about 10 or so minutes of let's just comprehensively cover what you did, right? So yes, you watched me do a VLOOKUP before, but now we're going to actually do a more comprehensive example where we're doing an if function and VLOOKUPs and conditional formatting all in one worksheet, just trying to tie everything together, right? So in practice, you're never really just doing one skill at a time, but rather you're using a combination of skills to accomplish a goal. So this is just going to be a 10-minute walkthrough. And then I let them try it on their own with myself and my GTAs in the room walking around, actually helping them as they try this, right? So this way it's more of a guided, myself and GTAs are saying, all right, what can I help you with? And we're in the room. It's kind of a low stakes environment, right? So if they mess something up, that's okay, right? So this isn't the point where you're going to be mastering the content and perfect, but I want you actually in there, trying this on your own. And I want an element of critical thinking as well. And so that's where the questions kind of come in, right? So we might ask, here's a couple of examples of questions, but later on I might say, what amount of sales did we sell to customer A, right? So they might be able to use a pivot table. They might be able to use a, some if. There's a variety of different ways, and whichever way is easiest for you. Cool. You're able to solve my business problem using the skills we learned. That's perfect. That's going to be the lab setting, right? So you learn it asynchronously, learn it in the lab setting, and then you get to the homework assignment. Now, the homework assignment, this is where ExPrep comes in. Now, everything in yellow here is, now this is an example of a completed one. So this is one where I'm going to show you, a little bit of how the feedback works. But what they'll do is they'll actually upload it into ExPrep. Now, this is me actually submitting an example of this. So if I were to go here and go to, homework 1, for instance, I actually just submitted it this morning and I intentionally made some mistakes, but they would go over here to action, they would submit it. But if I were to look at it from a student perspective and I say, okay, well, I want to know, my feedback, then they're going to be able to actually see immediately what that feedback actually is. So if I were to go to homework, okay, so let me go back as an instructor real quick. If I were to go over here and go to homework, and then I were to go to, view submissions, then I can come out here and I can see exactly what the grade is, download that feedback, and this is what the homework assignment does. Now, the way that I do homework assignments is, keep in mind, they're not experts at it yet, but we're trying to get them to that level of mastery. So what happens is they have these, areas with yellow. This is what they're going to complete using instructions out here to the right. Now, when they do this, it might say something to the effect of, okay, let's look up a car name and the cost of the car, right? So the whole point of this is eventually we're going to do, calculate what's the monthly payment of the car. Is it above or below a budget, right? So that's the end goal. But there's a couple different steps to actually get there, and there's going to be instructions. Now, let's assume that I forget how to do a VLOOKUP. So I know that, all right, so I see that there's the car name. I see that there's this unique identifier and there's data down here, but how do I get that car, right? So I don't remember what function it is or how it works. What I do is I embed additional resources or references to additional resources so that they can immediately know where to go in order to get that help. So the whole point of homework is, yes, you're doing it on your own, but I want you to utilize resources, right? So it's oftentimes, there's a lot of times, even myself as an Excel nerd, I'll go into something, I'll say, oh, I forgot what this argument does or how I need to do it, right? So being able to reference resources is critical. So what I do is I tell them where it is. I'm not trying to do a whole lot of guessing game, and I tell them where it is. So what they can do is they can go back to the textbook, and instead of reading about it, here's what they can do. They can watch this video, because I told them 2.3 is where that video is. If you click here, this is all the information that you need to know about a VLOOKUP in this class. Now, does this mean students are reading all this for all the functions? No. And I tell students, I'm like, if you understand it, then you're fine. If you understand the why, you understand the how, then you don't have to read every single word. But if you don't understand the function, then utilize this resource. So it'll tell you, okay, what does a VLOOKUP actually do? Just high level, here's an explanation, limitations, here's all the arguments, and it's all geared towards the class, right? So it's actually relevant to how I communicate it in a lecture setting. And it just tells them, this is what this argument is actually looking for, just put into simple words. And then I have a short help video as well. So what I found was, a lot of times if you just reference a lecture video, students might struggle to find where in that lecture video that particular topic is. So I might say, go to this lecture video, and I might cover VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. Well, now they have to search between, okay, what part of the video do you cover VLOOKUP? Well, what I do is instead I provide this help video. Now this help video, it's 2 minutes. It's just a directly, to the point explanation of, this is me performing a VLOOKUP. And then I do the same thing with an HLOOKUP as well. That way, every single argument is just right there. If students want to know where a particular concept is, there's a search bar. They can find any topic they want. But to go into a little bit of Excel and ExPrep and how I use it, and one of the benefits that I found. So if you take something like this submission, right? So you attempt it and you submit it. How does it grade? Because previously, I was spending almost all of my time trying to decipher, how did this external platform grade the assignment, and I'm answering questions about that. So a good example was, I would give them a data validation, and they would, for me, they might, I might go in and reference a list of data, whereas some people might go in and type the data. Well, if they reference the list, now it grades it wrong. Well, that's not how the grading works on this side. So how does it work? Well, they submit it, and immediately they get this feedback, and everything in red is wrong. So if you want to look at an explanation of what's wrong, there's a student score report. So the student score report, all the feedback out here is what I've actually typed out for the assignment. So this is just general. So as students make mistakes throughout the semester, I update this feedback to make it more relevant, right? So I'm trying to get better and improve the feedback over time. So students typically make this mistake. Cool, I'll update the feedback to this. But out here in the student score report, it'll tell you, this is exactly what I went, where I went wrong. So make sure the monthly payment is calculating. Sorry about that. There we go. So it might say, make sure you absolute reference your array, right? So that's a very common mistake that students make early on with VLOOKUPs. So make sure you absolute reference your array. Make sure you're also using an exact match. So using an approximate match will throw out the wrong output. And so this is some general feedback. Now, how does this actually work? How's it grade? Well, here, the way that I have it set up, keep in mind you can have more rigid, less rigid, but I'm more focused on, did you use a correct function? Did you get the correct output? So a good example that I ran into with some other different sites was if I wanted to do a payment function, for instance, right? So a payment function is a great example. I tend to teach students that if you put a negative sign in front of PMT, then it reverses the sign from negative to positive. But what if you came out here and put the negative sign, inside of the present value instead? It does the same thing. Either way, it flips the sign. It goes from the default negative to now it's positive. But what I was finding was I taught negative in front of the PMT, but the textbook wanted it negative inside the present value function. So either way, the student was doing it correctly, but it was grading it wrong. That's not how this is set up to grade. For me, did they use the right function? Yes. Payment function. Did it give the correct output? Yes. So is there flexibility on how they actually do the payment function and where they put the negative sign? Yeah. I don't care where they put the negative sign as long as it's the correct function and also the correct output. So as an example, here, they actually have the correct card name, but they typed it in, right? So oftentimes early on, students will manually type it. They'll say, oh, there's just 10 of them, so they'll manually type it. Well, it's wrong because they were supposed to use a VLOOKUP. But it found, yes, you got the right value, but you didn't use the right function. Over here's another example where I say, okay, you use the right function, but you messed up something inside of that function. So without going too far in the details, we're just saying if it's below average, then return below average. If it's above average, return above. All they did in this case was forgot to absolute reference the cell. They drag it down, and now you get something messed up. So what it does is it determines, yes, you used the correct function, but it had the incorrect output, and so that's where it's going to grade. And then later on in the class, what ends up happening is sometimes we might use a VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, index match, right? So later on, we contrast between the different types of lookup functions. So sometimes a VLOOKUP can work. Sometimes an XLOOKUP can work. Sometimes using an index match is going to be better, right? So in those cases, if you could use a VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, or index match for a homework assignment, if all three of those are an option, then it accepts any of those, right? So it'll accept VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, or index match, then also figure out if you got the right output. So the point of this is to try to, as I go throughout, reinforce the students that yes, there's multiple ways of accomplishing this. But what I care more about is, did you use the right skill? Did you use the right concepts? And then from there, did you actually get the actual correct output? But the point of this is it's all very connected. It's one voice. Every single assignment is instructed by me. I customize all of them. And now what they learn in class lines up with what they learn in lab and lines up with what they learn and reinforce in homework. And it's also how they get tested as well. So my exams look like this as well. They're more comprehensive, but I'll be very hands-on. And what this does is this actually reinforces with them about, okay, so we're actually using Excel. We're actually solving business problems instead of trying to water down the class to a point of maybe multiple choice. And now it's scalable. Whereas if I had a class of 30 or if I have a class of 1,300, either way, I'm spending more of my time value add with students and giving immediate feedback rather than all the admin and the grading and then all the disputes. The other thing, and I know we're getting to a point of Q&A here.
And we have some questions coming in too. For you too.
Perfect. So I'm going to start answering questions in just a moment. But another thing I want to mention as well is there have been times where something wasn't grading the way that I thought it was going to. And students come to me in nearing office hours and they say, this is what's happening. This isn't grading correctly. And I say, you are correct. Update the grading, press regrade, and then now it's correct, right? So there's a lot more flexibility on that end as well. So I'm going to pause real quick. I know I've covered a lot of content, and I'll go ahead and start answering some questions.
Yeah. So first thing, you can leave your camera there if you want. We'll stay separate. But the first question is actually going to come from me. So if you could, just spend a quick minute kind of breaking down, like I know you showed, Great River Learning, which is obviously make sure that everybody knows, like this is your textbook,
yeah.
Right? This is Winston's textbook that he has written with Great River Learning. Can you kind of explain, just make sure that everybody understands, like, because you're using different tools, right? You have your textbook that you've created, made all these great videos, done all this cool stuff.
Yeah.
And then your textbook then is then driving them to, I'd like to say to ExPrep, but really before that, they're driving them to the Excel content that you've created.
That's right.
So you've created these Excel assignments that, obviously you needed a place to host for grading, right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of three pieces to your puzzle, right? You have your book that you've created. There's Winston in the middle that's also creating Excel content that's going with his book and those materials. and then ExPrep being the platform that kind of handles your content. Your assignments kind of go both directions, right? They
Yeah.
move into GRL for your textbook, but then they also come to ExPrep so you can set up your automated grading.
That's exactly right. And so as you were mentioning, so one site, GRL, I completely made all this content. So all the videos, every single one of these
And that was
explanations.
actually one of the questions from coming in the crowd was
Oh.
to ask, how long did it take for you to come up with, to create these assignments and the videos that you're utilizing?
That's a great question. So, and I'll get to that as well. So all the assignments, all of the content, every word that's written out, all the videos, that's actually all me. And GRL is where you know that's where the textbook is. And so students go here for content, and all the assignments themselves are in ExPrep. So they don't submit assignments in GRL, they submit it in ExPrep. That's where they get the immediate feedback as well. The way that I do it, so I have these Canvas pages. So, you know, in a typical week, they have a Canvas page where they have this overview, just a quick explanation of just learning objectives and a to-do list, right? So it's just explaining what it is that they're going to do. And my Canvas page just kind of walks through, and here you'll see that it talks about, okay, what's the point of asynchronous, what's the resources, but down here you'll see that there's a link to GRL content, that's where the content is, and then also the assignment here as well. So GRL and ExPrep work hand in hand, and it's because I created the assignments and the content. Now, how long did it take me to create? Well, my class, when I took it over, because of COVID and coming out of that, and then limited room space, we learned early on that we were going to do asynchronous content. So I had actually already created a lot of content. Now, how long did it take me to record those videos? The amount of time that it took me to whatever the lecture time is. So let's just assume in a typical week, so it's, you know, a 3-hour course, so 150 minutes a week. So if I have 100 minutes of content, it probably took me 3 times that amount to properly record the video, edit it, and you know, make sure it's the way that I want it to be, and also creating the assignment up front as well. So early on, you know, I was just in the weeds of it, creating the assignments. And then over time, what I did was I evolved it. So every single summer, I figured out, okay, what worked in this assignment, what didn't, and I would evolve it over time. And what eventually happened is I had lab assignments, and previously those were just all completion. We'll just see what happens, and they can mess it up, and that's fine. And then whenever I found ExPrep, I said, oh, well, let me take these back. I just took those same assignments and converted it into auto grading. So how long did it take? It took a couple years. This is my 4th year teaching it. It took about all 3. I would say it took a solid 2 years to really perfect all the assignments and make videos I was happy with. And then 1 year of really battle testing this particular platform, getting it to where I'm at. And I'll say students, and I'm not just saying this because I feel good about it, but students' feedback has been tremendous in terms of the amount of value they've gotten from it.
But you were using the ExPrep platform before you had created all of the other stuff, right? All the videos and the different things, right? So I, just to clarify to, people that don't have their own textbook that are on this call, right? Like, obviously, Winston has the text that, then communicates with his content that he, houses and stores on the ExPrep platform, right? So if you're somebody out there, who probably the majority of you that don't have your own textbook, obviously, and I know Winston and I've had, conversations about this, like, you can store your content anywhere you want, right? He has just organized it with GRL in a way where he has it in online text, has, connected that into ExPrep so that he can use but probably everything started around your assignments, right? I mean,
It did.
You had these amazing Excel assignments and you went, now, how do I, what's the platform to teach them? Right? Because that's when you probably, I'm assuming, so correct me if I'm wrong, is when you said, hey, I'm going to go write this book. I can be in complete control to structure this the way I want. And then obviously, through that relationship and the relationship we have at the University of Tennessee, you got introduced to us at ExPrep and said, okay, cool. Now I took my content and great way to deliver it. Now I have a great way to not spend those 20 to 30 hours a week grading, and allowing your GAs or whatever those letters are. I think they're your graduate assistants. Allowing them, we talked about this earlier today, allowing them to do things that are more enjoyable than grading. Like, I would much rather be teaching somebody how to do something than being the person that only gets to criticize what they've done, right? So I would imagine that that's so much better for them. So just want to make sure that everybody would understand the difference. You don't have to be Winston with a book and to use ExPrep. I would say most people, and we have other professors that have written books, but I think most people that come to us really are coming to us with that content, right? They have these amazing assignments, or even one assignment that just is a pain to grade. You can't grade it exactly the way you want. And that's how they end up on, with ExPrep, is they end up on a call with somebody like me, where we go through their content like we did with you and said, hey, yeah, we could grade this for you in an automated way where you don't have to touch it and deliver that feedback to your students. So, I think that that's where most of you would start. So if you're a professor out there that literally is teaching any concept whatsoever, but you're using Excel as that learning tool. I know Winston's class is really around using Excel, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, if Excel is the tool, then we have a solution for grading. I just want to make sure people understand that you don't have to be using a GRL book to be able to use ExPrep. Really, all you have to have is an assignment in Excel that you would rather have it automated and graded and streamlined. And I think you did a great job, Winston, talking about how you utilize our feedback, so students can actually get feedback in real time versus just their grade in real time. It's a great way to interact with students. That's the one thing I don't know. I think when you started your story, you were talking about, you were teaching about 700 students. How many students are in your class now?
1,300. And this is my small semester too. So in the spring, it's always larger. So, and when you teach a class that's 1,300 students, if one small thing goes wrong, then, I mean, the amount of emails and concerns you get. So what I did was, currently I have 15 asynchronous assignments, 10 labs, 10 homework. So, and then also assessments on top of that. But what I did was I just started small. I said, let me just take a couple of assignments, see how this works. And I tested it. And then from there, learned how to structure my assignments and then really build it into what it was. So if you want to just start with a couple small assignments, then that's how I start.
Yeah. So one thing that, for when you first did, how many Excel assignments do you host on our platform?
So let's see, 15 asynchronous, 10 lab, 10 homework, 3 exams. So roughly in the ballpark of 35 to 38 assignments.
Okay. Yeah, I always ballpark you at 40. So I'm probably making myself look a little cooler there. When you first came to us, and I remember this process a little bit. So because you kind of bulked everything, you said, hey, here's my 30 some assignments, for you guys. So just for everybody in the crowd, like Winston didn't have to set up any of the automation for his grading. He basically sent us, these 35 assignments and said, could you guys, create the automation to grade this automatically on your platform. And I guess I'm going to brag a little bit here. So I'll put a big smile on my face. How long did it take for us to spin those back around and have them ready for your class?
It was very quick. I don't remember the exact number of days, but it was impressively quick.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something I always want people to know is like, because I do hear that when I talk to people that are using other platforms, like, hey, yeah, I can customize some things, but I have to send it off and I got to wait a couple days to get a little tweak to something. And like you sent us 35 assignments, and our thought is like get them spun up for you as fast as we can so you can start utilizing them. Obviously, we save you time. We know that now you'll be able to reallocate that time into other things that you're going to do. One of them will be making the assignments even better and better for your students. So, and I know I've got to watch you over the years kind of go through that process. Like I knew you before the book. I knew you before all of that stuff. So it's been really cool to kind of watch how you've grown everything and put it together. And you've got to get some chills talking about it. But it's been cool to watching your feedback grow, because I know that's been extremely important to you, that, like I said, not only do they get the grade in real time, but they're able to get their information back. I always talk to you about my kids and how they complain about teachers taking too long to get stuff back to them. I mean, we have kids now that we teach that everything is at their disposal at their fingertips, and they expect us humans to work like a computer. So, obviously I think you have more to talk about. So, but if there are other people that have questions, we make sure this isn't a question here that's coming in. Who's this? Oh, someone's asking about any kind of, the question I'm assuming here is asking if you're anything with AI, any tips, anything that you're doing with AI with your students in Excel?
Yeah, so some of the things I talk about with AI. So I've not gone too far into using it yet, because what tends to happen. So I'm a very introductory class, so I'm teaching them the basics of Excel, and I try to teach them also that once you learn Excel, you learn the critical thinking that goes into other things. And so later on in the class, I actually start a portion where it's kind of what's beyond Excel. So I do a demo of JavaScript, a demo of this, and I talk about these are the things that are next, and there's other classes down the line that actually do it. But one thing I do emphasize actually at one of them is I actually in one of my labs, I actually show that, and actually throughout the class, so they learn about macros. And so what I do is I talk about how all right, so if I want to, a data set and I want to figure out, okay, what's the average car price? Then I go into ChatGPT, and this is where that data set came from. I just ChatGPT, average car price. Now let's do some payment functions. And so I teach them a little bit about how you can, get some data from there. And then also the other thing when you get into macros is oftentimes, I'm not necessarily always creating macros from scratch unless sometimes I do because I'm a nerd, but a lot of times you might record a macro or you might go to the internet or ask ChatGPT for something. And what I try to emphasize to them is teaching them how to critically think through what is that output that's being provided, and then how can we edit it to accomplish what it is that we're trying to accomplish, right? So I might say that, yes, ChatGPT can, create some code, but if you don't understand what the code says, then it's not gonna actually work. So I teach them how to copy and paste code into VPA and then make some minor edits to actually accomplish it. But I try to teach them how to critically think through a lot of that stuff, and then tell them that future classes will actually be a little bit more hands-on with that.
Another question that just came in, and this is one of the easier ones. What year student are you teaching? Where do they run into your class at?
Yeah, so typically sophomores. So a lot of times I get a lot of students also transferring from community college, so they might be more at the junior level. But if they're going through UT, then typically sophomore level. And this is for the entire College of Business. So the point of this class was to make it relevant. And so even though I'm an accounting person, I try to make examples that have HR, supply chain, data analytics, accounting, finance. And so typically sophomore level, they take my class before a lot of the other business classes. And so, I'm more the upstream, and then they start taking their business classes typically the semester after.
I will definitely tell you that the other professors at the University of Tennessee thank Winston for teaching Excel in the way that you do. So when they get to their classes later on, they understand Excel. But there's also the fringe benefit that they bring up is that you teach them how to use my platform.
Yes.
You teach them ExPrep. So I thank you for that when they get to other classes that they already know, obviously going through 35 to 40 assignments with you, they are experts at ExPrep and hopefully pretty well expert at Excel by the time they're leaving your course. I'm going to ask the question I asked you earlier, because obviously you're teaching an Excel class. Like, you get students that are good at Excel, you get students that aren't real good at Excel. You probably get a huge difference where some of these other people that are teaching something that students that no one's ever really dove into it. What are the differences in some of the students that you see, and is there anything that you do different when you have a student that's way better or way worse?
Well, what I tend to find is I'll have a lot of students come in, and week one they're very nervous. They say, oh, I'm not good at computers, I've never touched Excel. They're a little intimidated at first. That's the bulk of my students, right? So oftentimes they're learning it for the first time, or they had a high school class, but they're not proficient in it. And so a lot of times for them, I'm just talking about all the benefits that they're going to get, and to not worry too much, because I've structured it to where they're going to learn it. But then I get the other students on the other side that are so motivated, and they come to me all the time asking me for, okay, how this stuff is very cool. This stuff, like, I understand the class. What additional resources can I get? Because a lot of times they say, oh, I want to go the next step. This is cool. I want to learn the advanced skills. And so for now, I do a lot of directing them to, LinkedIn learning resources. I talk about some other classes down the line. But the other cool thing that happens is they'll bring me an Excel problem, and they'll say, in my internship, I'm doing this. I know that there's a better way to do it from our class. Can you help me? And so I actually end up with a lot of students a semester later or a year later coming to my office just asking for help in that regard. So typically I just try to direct them to a lot of resources, and it's really cool to talk with those, more nerdy students that are, a little bit more advanced.
Well, I also, and I'll end with this. So anybody else has questions from the crowd, please throw them in the Q&A. But when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned that, some of your graduate assistants that come back, like, they took your class, right? And now they're grad students, and they come back, and like, I know I love the smile on your face because you know where I'm going with this, but they enjoyed your class to the point, like you were saying, like, they like to come back and help out in that class. It's very hands-on. They get to actually be involved with something, right? Versus, like you're saying, they could be in another class where they have to think a lot more. They can, and the biggest thing that I really liked about it is you hear from them that when they come back in, that they're getting to keep their skills sharp. They're getting to keep using Excel, because I say that all the time. Like, I can do certain things in Excel, but I don't do them enough that I know how to do it right off the cusp. I can't just say, hey, let me go. I'll throw myself under the bus. Like, I can't just go create a pivot table the way you would do it, and as easy and as quick as you would, because I don't do pivot tables all the time, right? But if I were helping you out in your course, every semester I'm getting a little refresher
Oh, yeah.
in that. And now, you know, my skills will be sharpened. So I thought from our conversation the last couple of days, that was one of the things that really struck me, was that you get kids that come back and
Yep.
want to be part of your class after they took it. And I thought that was something to point out, because obviously you're doing a good job, where they would run away from your class, not want to come back and do it twice. So
And every semester I get students in my class saying, how can I be a GTA? So that's the fun part. But to your point, they come back as a GTA, they've already done an internship, and now they actually appreciate that refresher course a lot more.
I don't think we have any other questions coming in, and we're at about almost, like, I guess, 40 minutes of talk time, but 47 minutes after the hour. Edna, I know you are the ultimate host here. Are there any other questions that you're seeing? And so that we can make sure that we get answered before we conclude.
No, I do not see any more questions. Feel free to ask questions in the Q&A feature or in the chat message, and we'll answer them right away. So if you have any questions, feel free
Yeah,
to.
so I think, if anybody else has questions, throw them in the Q&A. We'll stick around probably for the next 12 minutes to the top of the hour to make sure that we can answer anybody else's questions. I'm sure, you know, there's been places people have posted to where you can reach out, but obviously I'm Brooks. I'm one of the, you know, I'm a salesperson at ExPrep. So if you need information, you know, feel free to find a way onto my calendar, and you know, I can answer any of the questions the way when I originally met Winston, and we can go through, you know, what you're trying to accomplish and figure out how to get you set up on a plan like Winston has, even though I think it was more your plan and I'm part of it. But you know, we definitely can share best practices that we know from other people, get your content spun up the way you want it, and then allow you to create that plan to then enhance it and make it better over time, right? I mean, your stuff is multiple semesters deep into a process. This isn't, you know, the first semester you were rolling it out.
And I'll also say, anybody that's where no matter where you're at in the journey of you know, course development and, you know, assigning things, I've been through the process and I've made some mistakes. I've learned from it. I've kind of taken time to correct it. Any questions y'all have after here, of course, feel free to reach out at any point as well. I'll go ahead and drop my email in the chat.
Oh, we had another question here. We have people just thanking you. So I'll take that as a great question. Somebody wants to make that comment.
We will be emailing everybody who attended the webinar a video recording of what was talked today. So if you guys are interested in receiving a sandbox or booking a demo, we'll be sending you more information on that later.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that about a demo. I mean, if somebody wants to, you know, we definitely try to keep these webinars much more focused on, you know, in my opinion, the true host, Winston, on whoever our guest is that comes in and how they're doing things, you know, versus being me and a sales guy being salesy. But obviously, I mean, if anybody wants to dive deeper into what they're doing, you know, I think Winston would definitely agree that, you know, our main goal is to get on there and be a helpful tool. Right. Obviously, everybody knows there's expenses that come with this. I mean, you know, we don't have to hide behind those things, but at the same time, you know, the focus is on, you know, where are you at? What is the content or the assignments that you have? And, you know, what can we do to take that time off your plate to make it so you can do like what Winston has done, which is reinvest your time. I use the term human capital all the time, right? I mean, I try to manage my own personal human capital as much as I can. Winston, I think, is doing a great job of that, of saying, hey, I'm not going to spend time here, because that takes away from me being great over here, right? And, you know, grading is obviously one of the things that you can automate, right? I don't drive a manual transmission anymore, right? When I was a kid, that was a lot of fun to shift through the gears, but now it's kind of nice to just push the gas pedal and, you know, people do exactly, the car does exactly what I wanted it to do. So, you know, I mean, automating this part of your life to be able to open up more time for your office hours, you know, more time to be spending with your students, or more time to be spending at home with your family, right?
Oh,
I mean, any of those things are positive ways that we can, we can spend our time. But yeah, if anybody wants to dive in more, I mean, I love learning about people's classes. I think that's one of the things at ExPrep that we really enjoy is that first introduction of like, hey, what do you teach? Are you teaching an Excel class, or are you teaching an accounting class? Are you teaching supply chain? Are you teaching finance? Like, what is it that you're teaching, and how are you using Excel as a tool? Because as soon as you get talking to someone at ExPrep about how you're using the tool Excel, we're all going to get really geeky really fast about what you're doing and how we can maximize that tool for you. So, we still have 8 more minutes. So if we have any other questions, then, definitely if anything for Winston, throw it in here so we can get your questions answered. But hopefully a couple people will hop on my calendar and I can, we can talk a little bit more detail about them. I'm trying to think if there's anything that we really, that you missed that I want questions answered on, but I asked you some questions already, so. I have somebody typing, so maybe a question coming. Where did you see that? Maybe in the chat. I'm sorry, I was in the Q&A. So I'm seeing here, what sort of classes do you work with? What is the, I'm assuming that's more of an ExPrep. Honestly, the answer is very simple. We work with any class that uses Excel as a tool. I'm trying to think of crazy ones. Like, I mean, obviously in the business school, I think Winston mentioned that, different type of content he puts together. Like I just mentioned, accounting, supply chain, finance, econ, stat, right? Anybody that's going to use that. But then like, I also know like right now we're talking to a physics professor, right? Why? Because we have there's a physics professor out there who collects data, has their students collect data and puts it into Excel and has them compute things out of Excel and is creating something that's probably just too big for her to grade. It's just she created this amazing thing and now I went, oh, wow, how am I going to grade it? Kind of reverse aha moment for her of what she needed to do. So I think to answer that question, I mean, I would want to keep it that simple, is if you're using Excel as a tool, I would want to be friends with ExPrep and know what they do to automate, because I don't think it's going to matter what the topic is. I'm trying to think if there's anything crazier than physics that people wouldn't think of, but I mean, it literally could be any topic as long as you're using Excel as that tool.
Yeah, I mean, even different things. We have Excel competitions on campus with financial modeling and whatnot, where even stuff like that, where competitions are fully automated. That was a cool process that Brandon came down for that one. Back in the spring, and seeing full financial models where students are completing these and trying to do what they can and submit those, and move on to different categories, and even different companies using that in training and whatnot too. So it's
yeah, and I mean, because that is huge, and that's become a big part of what we do at ExPrep, right? Is, I mean, everybody in this world is academia, but there's an entire section of people that when they leave academia are interested in what your skill sets are, right?
Yeah.
And that's these corporations, and now we've been ExPrep's been aligning with some of these companies to put on these shows and come in and do competitions. We work with companies who are interested in your students, right? I mean, if obviously any finance company out there who is training the next people that work on Wall Street are going to be interested in students in finance classes. So that's something else that ExPrep is involved in, right? Is working with connecting academia to companies, right? I mean, there's great students out there in all these schools, and they just need a door open that, hey, this company is interested in you because you took a certain class at a university and scored really well on a piece of content.
Yeah.
Now I'd like for you to come in and interview. Like, that's a really cool concept that, you brought up modeling, that we do with a lot of financial modeling companies. Obviously, everybody, I think, in the financial modeling world uses Excel to some degree. So obviously in finance is where we're going to be very much needed, and they have huge complex models that would take days to grade in some instances. So, but I think that, and I know that's something that we talk about a lot, is trying to, figure out ways to bridge that gap. And I know that the companies that we work with are interested in our college students, which is going to be a really cool future thing for ExPrep. It's going to be cool to connect those students with those companies. So, all right, is there something else in here? I think we're good. Well, we're right at the top of the hour. Like I said, I'm gonna quit chatting, but if anybody has any questions, I mean, we'll hold tight for 3 more minutes and then we'll exit. So if you're still around, thank you very much. And a big thanks to Winston. Anybody that's watching the recording and stuck around at this time, big thanks to everybody for spending an hour with us. This is fun stuff. It's probably, like I told Winston, this might be the most fun I have at work. Like I love hopping on these and listening to the stories of people that we're working with. I think this is a fun thing. So I'm gonna shake your hand one more
Yeah,
time.
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Winston.
much, Brooks. Thank you, ExPrep,
Yep.
and thank you
Thanks
for
to
everyone as well.
everybody that's out there. Thank you very much.